To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
Hello my dear students, welcome to today's lesson. Today I am going to discuss with you all the GCE O-Level year 2021 paper 1. That is science paper 1, that is the MCQ type questions. So here I have put a format of the question paper. You can see at the top they give you the introduction. This is by the Department of Examination. You all are familiar with the number 34 is for science, E for English and 1 for paper 1. Then it says General Certificate of Education Ordinary Level Examination 2021. The held year is 2022. Then science 1 is for paper 1 and the time duration is 1 hour. You have to answer all 40 questions in the question paper within 1 hour and mark all the answers in the answer sheet provided to you. So that is 1 hour. Then the instructions are given to you here. You can see students this side. We have the instructions. First one is answer all questions because you know paper 1 is out of 40 marks. There are 40 MCQ questions. So each one carries 1 mark. You have to answer all questions. Even if you leave out one question, then you will be losing marks. So you have to answer all of them. The second instruction, in each of the questions 1 to 40, pick one of the alternatives 1, 2, 3, 4 which you consider is correct or most appropriate. I have discussed a question paper before also, so you know students. Some questions or most of the questions have a direct answer, but there are questions where you get two similar answers, but one will be more appropriate for the question. So that is why they have said correct or most appropriate. Then what do? Mark a cross on the number corresponding to your choice in the answer sheet provided. So in the next page, I have put the answer sheet. You are familiar with this also. This is how you get the answer sheet. That is again for GCE O-Level MCQ answer sheet. You have to write the subject and your index number. Then this is what you do. If you select the third answer for the first question, you have to put a cross on top of it. Second answer for the second question, cross on top of that. And you know students, you should do it very neatly. You can't cut and chop and do that. Let's say if you mark answer 1 for the fifth question, then you feel it's wrong. Then you can't just cut it like that and mark answer 3. That is incorrect. You should not do that. And sometimes, let's say if you're answering the question on the question paper first and then you are going to transfer the answers to this particular sheet. By mistake, if you mark, let's say 2 and 4 for the question because 2 is relevant for the 6th question, 4 is for the 7th question. But by mistake, you mark them both on the same line. Then you won't get marks for both the 6th question and the 7th question. So you have to be very careful when transferring the answers. So make sure you mark only one correct answer for one question. You have to do it neatly. If you have a doubt for a particular question, the answer, mark it with a pencil and then later you can mark it with a pen. And also there will be instructions given at the other side of this answer sheet as well. You need to read them and answer the questions accordingly. So you have to consider all the instructions given to you. And all that has to be done within 1 hour. So this is the answer sheet format. Then the next one is further instructions are given on the back of the answer sheet. Follow them carefully. So I told that as well. Then if you look at the questions, like normally you do have a biology question which is a very direct question. That is the first question. Then you can see a chemistry one and a physics related question. Like that, if you look at the full paper, you will understand that paper 1, all 40 questions come from all different units. Even if it is the same unit, it can be from different parts of the unit. So this covers basically your full syllabus. You have to remember that. And there are questions with pictures given here, diagram, then again a diagram from which you need to answer, then equations like this, Then you have where you have the ascending, descending order. Then there are questions where you have statements sometimes, then diagram, a graph, all that. Here you can see statements. Out of that you need to select, like that, various types of questions. So from 1 to 40. Again, here you can see A and B statements. Then you have a diagram here. Then you have a table. A graph is given. A wave. So like that you get different types. Then here again you can see a graph. Then equation. Again a table, and here you can see from 37 to 40 you have to answer based on that table and the introduction. So there are questions like that also related to a particular concept. 2, 3 or 4 questions need to be answered based on that. Like that you can have different formats, but all the questions come with 4 answers. You have to select the most appropriate or the correct answer and mark your answer in your answer sheet. And this goes up to 40 MCQs. So that is the format of the paper, students. Again, I am reminding you, you have to answer all 40 questions, and remember each question counts for 1 mark for your final mark. Because you can remember paper 1 is marked out of 40, paper 2 is marked out of 120, but they divide it by 2 and make it out of 60, and that is added with the mark of your paper 1. So each question 1 mark. You have to answer all the questions. And when doing so, be careful, do it neatly and correctly in the answer sheet given to you. That is that paper where you mark the answers. You put a cross on the relevant answer. Is that clear, students? So those are the things that you need to consider before you start reading and answering the questions. So I have given you a brief introduction. With that, I am going to move on to the questions where I discuss the questions with you all. But before I do that, it is always better if you have a copy of the paper. You can do that. You can download a PDF format from the Department of Examinations website, or under this particular video, there is a link provided to you all. From there also, you can download the paper. Using that, you can answer the questions, and then you can compare your answers with my discussion. So then I'll move on to the first question. Okay. So I'll start with the first question. Question number 1. To which of the following organizational level does the human heart belong? So if you look at the answers, you all can see cell, tissue, organ, system. We have seen similar questions before. You all know cells are the basic structural and functional units of the living organisms. When a group of cells are adapted to perform a specific function, we call it a tissue, and different types of tissues together forms the organ. Organs together to perform a particular function becomes the system, and there are several systems in an organism. So that is how the organizational levels are. So for example, if you take here, of course, human heart. Heart is made up of cardiac muscle cell. So cardiac muscle cells together forms a cardiac muscle tissue. The tissues, that is the muscle tissue plus the epithelial tissue and the blood vessels, nerves, everything together forms the human heart. So there the human heart is an organ. Then the human heart plus the veins, the arteries, capillaries all together is the blood circulatory system. So there, if you look at the organizational level, you can understand that the human heart belongs to the level organ. Is that clear, students? So with that, we'll move on to the next question. Second one, the hydrocarbons contained in LP gas as its major components are. So if you consider LP gas, we have discussed about hydrocarbons. These are compounds made up of carbon and hydrogen only. And you all know the number of carbons starts from 1 carbon, that is methane, and the number of carbons increases. So in LP gas, there are 2 main components. You all know C3H8, that is propane, and C4H10, that is butane. Both these are the main components of LP gas. So both are hydrocarbons. 3 carbon hydrocarbon, that is alkane, is propane, and 4 carbons is butane. Now if we look at the answers, the first one, methane and ethane. Methane is a component of biogas. Ethane again is a gaseous component. Then second one, propane and butane, that is the answer. Then butane and pentane. Pentane is a 5 carbon hydrocarbon. And then fourth one is propane and pentane. So that also that is a different combination. So the correct answer, that is the hydrocarbons contained in LP gas, are both propane and butane. Is that clear, students? So then we'll move on to the next one. That is question number 3. What is the unit of the amount of work done? Now normally you all know energy and work done both have the unit joules. Energy and also work done, both of them have the unit joules. Now how do we calculate work? Energy and work done. So if we are to calculate work, you all can remember force into displacement. Distance moved by the force or the displacement due to force. So there you all can remember force as the unit Newton and distance is in meters. But if you substitute for force you can remember mass into acceleration. F equals ma. So there the unit is going to be kilogram meter second minus 2 into meters. So if you combine these together, you will get the unit as kilogram meter squared second minus 2. So instead of joules, work done is in joules. You can have the unit kilogram meter squared second minus 2. So here the answers are given in that manner. Look at the answers. Kilogram meters per second. That is mass and velocity. Momentum. First one is momentum. Then kilogram meter second minus 2 equals Newton. Force. Then kilogram meter minus 1 second minus 1. And the fourth answer, kilogram meter squared second minus 2. That is the unit of the amount of work. Although it is Newton meters or joules, that is equivalent to this particular unit. Is that clear, students? So with that, I'll move on to the next one. Question number 4. Which of the following is not a characteristic of the cardiac muscle tissue? So cardiac muscle tissue, I'll read the answers. Cells being mononuclear, occurrence of intercalated disc, cells being branched and acting voluntarily. So to understand this, I'll move on to the next slide. Here I have put the diagrams of the 3 types of muscle cells. Here you can see the first one is cardiac muscle tissue. So if you look at the cardiac muscle tissue, students, you all can see they are branch short cells and they are separated by these intercalated discs. There are cross striations and within one cell you can see there is one nucleus. So it is uninucleate and these are involuntarily controlled and also they do not get fatigue. Those are the properties of cardiac muscle, features of cardiac muscle. Then we have the smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, of course, you can see it is a spindle-shaped cell and it has one nucleus. There are no cross striations and they are again involuntarily controlled, but they get fatigue very slowly or they rarely get fatigue. Cardiac muscle never gets fatigue. This one rarely gets fatigue. If you compare these two with the last type, that is the skeletal muscular tissue, you can see they are long, thin, cylindrical fibers with cross striations there and also in each fiber you can see there are many nuclei. So this is a multinucleate structure. That is something you can see here. And skeletal muscles usually are voluntarily controlled and also they get fatigue easily. So those are the 3 types of muscle tissues. Now that you know their features, we can easily answer the question. Now, which of the following is not a characteristic? So it is not a characteristic of the cardiac muscle tissue. Cells being mononuclear. That is correct, no? Just one nucleus, mononucleate. Occurrence of intercalated disc, yes, we saw that. And cells being branched, that is also correct. You saw the cells being branched. And they are acting voluntarily, that is not correct. These are involuntarily acting muscles. So, is that correct? Clear, students? So, these are the three characteristics of the cardiac muscle. Cells being mononuclear, occurrence of intercalated disc, and cells being branched. But they are not voluntarily controlled. They are involuntarily controlled. So, the answer is the fourth answer. With that, I'll move on to the next one. Question number 5. A seed observed by a student during a field study is shown in the diagram. So, you can look at the seed, students. Here you can see this part is the seed. Then there are two wing-like structures. So, from that you all are familiar with this. Now, we have discussed the dispersal of fruits and seeds, and you know there are different ways in which they are dispersed, and depending on how they get dispersed, they have different adaptations. So, if you look at the question, this seed is dispersed by. So, that is what you need to answer also. So, by looking at the structure, you can't really identify the size of the seed, but you all have seen this similar one. Now, you can remember Dipterocarpus. That is a seed like this. So, there what is the structure you see? Now, the seed is of course dry and usually it's small and it's light. At the same time, the important part is this, the wing-like structure. Now, when you have either wing-like structures, hair-like structures, or cotton wool-like structure and light seeds, you all know they are usually dispersed by wind. So, here from this wing-like structure itself, you can identify that they will be dispersed by wind. So, that is what you need to look for. Normally, when they are dispersed by wind, they are tiny seeds, they are light, they are produced in large number. Then they have structures to float with the wind. Hair-like structures or wind-like structures and wool-like structures. So, that is something you have to remember, students. Now, if we look at the answers, there are the other methods. Now, animals, if a seed is being dispersed by animals, you all know usually they have a very bright, attractive color, a different shape. Then they have a succulent edible part and also they have a fragrance. So that usually the animals consume the fruit as a food and then they disperse the seed. They take the seed to a different place. So it gets dispersed. Or else, you all know there are some seeds which deceive the animals because the seed looks like an insect or it has a bright color. Because of that, the animals mistake those seeds for their food and they take it from one place to the other. So, those are the adaptations when it is dispersed by animals. Another thing you have to remember, sometimes they can even stick to the body of the animal. That is also possible. They can have hook-like structures, hair-like structures so that they can attach to the body of the animal. So, different adaptations. Then if it is water, you can remember like coconut. Now usually if it has to float on water, the seed or the fruit has to be light. So usually what happens is they have a very thick skin so that water doesn't penetrate into the seed. At the same time, you have a husk-like structure. So there are air pores and fibers. So the seed becomes light or the fruit becomes light. And inside that, there's usually a very hard shell, again to prevent the penetration of water. So, that is how the dispersal by water, the fruits or seeds that are dispersed by water have adaptations. Then, if you look at the third one, wind, like I explained to you all. Then, explosion. Now, explosion also, you all know the balsam plants, that is by explosion. Then, the lady's fingers. So, normally what happens is the fruit becomes very dry. It's not a fleshy fruit. It's like a pod. So, it usually dries a lot and when it dries, it explodes. So, due to that explosion, the force, the seeds are pushed away. Usually, the seeds that are dispersed by explosive mechanism are also carried with the wind. So, they are also very light seeds and dry seeds. You can remember that. So those are different adaptations. So by looking at the fruit or the seed, you all know most of the fruits and seeds. Otherwise, by looking at the structure, you can identify the method by which they are dispersed. So here, of course, you know the answer. Animals, water, it has to be by wind. So this seed that is given in the diagram is dispersed by wind. So with that, students, I'll move on to the next question. Which of the following quantity increases uniformly in an object moving with a constant acceleration? Now, when we say constant acceleration, what is constant acceleration? That is change in velocity divided by time. Velocity over time is the acceleration. So, if acceleration has to be constant, then what will increase constantly? That is velocity. So, it has to be velocity that increases constantly. Now, if you look at the answers given to us, first one is distance. Now, what is the change in distance called with time? That is the speed. Change in distance with time is known as the speed. So, not constant acceleration. Then constant displacement. If there is change in displacement with time, we call it the velocity. Change in displacement is velocity. Then change in velocity is acceleration. So, if velocity increases uniformly, then the acceleration will be constant. Then retardation. Retardation is what? That is deceleration. Now, we don't discuss change in retardation. We do not calculate anything after that. So, the answer for this particular question, which of the following quantity increases uniformly in an object moving with a constant acceleration? It is the change in velocity. Can you all understand that? So, it is change in velocity. You can remember, students, if we plot the graph also, you get a graph like that. Now, these two axes here, this will be velocity, this will be time, and the gradient will be the acceleration. So, here it is a constant gradient, so it is uniform acceleration or constant acceleration, where the velocity is increasing uniform. Is that clear, students? So, with that, I'll move on to the next question. Question number 7. Which of the following is equal in 40-19 potassium and 40-20 calcium atoms? So, here the question is related to number of subatomic particles, electron, neutrons and protons. So, if we look at both 40-19 potassium and 40-20 calcium. Now, if we look at the subatomic particles, protons equals the atomic number. So, here protons 19, here we have 20 protons. Atomic number is given below. Then, if you take the number of electrons, they are equal to the number of protons in a neutral atom. So, they are again 19 and 20. Then if you take the neutrons, now this is the mass number equals protons plus neutrons. So, how many neutrons are there? 40 minus 19, there are 21 neutrons here. The same way, if you calculate here, 40 minus 20, there are 20 neutrons in calcium. So, if you take potassium, protons and electrons are equal to 19, neutrons 21. Whereas in calcium, all three particles are in equal number, they are equal to 20. Now, if you look at the question, which of the following is equal in 40-19 potassium and 40-20 calcium atoms? None of these particles are equal in number. What is the similarity? Here, only the mass number is equal. Both of them have the mass number 40. Atomic number is anyway a unique property, so it cannot be equal for two different elements. Subatomic particles are also different, but only similarity is that both of them have the mass number 40. So the answers: number of electrons, no. Number of neutrons, no. So then if you look at the third answer, sum of the number of electrons and protons. Now sum of the number of electrons and protons, normally we don't calculate that as a value, but if you look at the values here. Now protons and electrons, you can see 19 and 19 for potassium. So it will be 38. Whereas if you take calcium, 20 and 20. So the number is going to be 40. So that is also different. Even if you just add up the number of protons and electrons or number of electrons and protons, still they differ between potassium and calcium. So that is not the answer. Then if you look at the fourth one, sum of the number of protons and neutrons. Sum of the number of protons and neutrons, as we discussed, it is the mass number. So both are 40. That is the only similar property, or what is equal between potassium and calcium is the mass number. So that is what we need to mark here. Sum of the number of protons and neutrons. Both are 40 and that is actually their mass number. So you have to remember, students, like I told you all, atomic number is unique for different elements. So you cannot have two elements with the same atomic number. But mass number can be same. That you have to remember. So with that, I'll move on to the next question. Question number 8. Which property of water causes water to be used as a cooling agent to remove excessive heat generated in an automobile engine? Now, cooling effect of water, coolant effect of water. What does that depend on? The high specific heat capacity. High specific heat capacity, that is written as simple C. What is specific heat capacity? The amount of heat that is needed to increase the temperature of 1 kilogram of a substance by 1 Kelvin is what we call as specific heat capacity. When that is high, the amount of heat absorbed by water to go into the vapor state also increases. Then it acts as a good solvent. I'll repeat that. Then it acts as a good coolant. So that is the property that is related to this. Used as a cooling agent to remove excessive heat generated in an automobile engine. First one, having a high specific heat capacity, that is correct. Second one, having a high boiling point. Now, water having a high boiling point makes it a liquid at room temperature. So, it is a liquid, because of that it provides a medium for living organisms. So, that is a different property. Then third one, being a colorless liquid. Now, being a colorless liquid doesn't have any advantage here, but for the aquatic plants, sunlight can penetrate through water because it is a colorless liquid, but not relevant to this instance. Then having a high density. Now, when water has high density, ice has less density, lower than water. Because of that, there is differential expansion in freezing. That is why during the winter season, when the top part of the water body becomes ice, still under the ice there is water and all the organisms are able to survive. So that is a different property. So relevant to this question, to remove excessive heat generated in automobile engine, it is having high specific heat capacity. Is that clear? Then we'll move on to the next question. Question number 9. In the process of digestion of food, bile necessary for the emulsification of lipids is produced in the gallbladder, liver, duodenum, pancreas. Now you can remember, students, if you consider the digestive system. Bile is produced by the liver, whereas bile is temporarily stored in the gallbladder. And whenever it is necessary, the bile duct opens into the duodenum. That is the C-shaped initial part of the small intestine. C-shaped structure, duodenum, that is the initial part of the small intestine. Then pancreas, of course, produces pancreatic juice, which contains different enzymes. That also opens into the small intestine along with bile, but still that is a different organ. So here, in the process of digestion of food, bile necessary for the emulsification of lipids is produced in the liver. That is the correct answer, liver. Now, you all know the meaning of emulsification of lipids also. Normally, you all know, students, the lipids, if they have a large molecule like that, the surface area is less. Then it is difficult for the enzymes to act on it. So what bile does is, it breaks this down into smaller components, droplets, the lipid droplets. That process is what we call as emulsification. So when this happens, the surface area increases and it is easy for the enzyme lipase to act on lipids and convert it to fatty acid and glycerol. For that, liver produces the bile and that is temporarily stored in the gallbladder, and whenever necessary, it is secreted into the duodenum. Is that clear, students? So with that, I'll move on to the next question. Question number 10. What is the essential element for the production of thyroxine hormone in the thyroid gland? So you all know, students, there are minerals. These are the different essential elements that are needed for the proper functioning of our body. If there is deficiency, if there is not enough of that element, we see certain symptoms. So here, for the production of thyroxine, what is the essential element? You all know it is iodine. That is why we normally use iodized salt also to provide enough iodine for the production of thyroxine. And thyroxine is a hormone that is really needed for the metabolic activities of the body. And there are many other functions, but that is very essential. It is a hormone that is very essential for the body. So if you look at the answers, sodium of course usually for the transfer of nerve impulse and all those, we need sodium. Then there is phosphorus, calcium and iodine. Phosphorus, it is a constituent of nucleic acid, and also calcium, it is needed for the development of bones and teeth, but iodine is needed for the production of thyroxine. So the answer is iodine. There are many other functions of sodium, phosphorus and calcium also, but here we need to find the element that is essential for the production of thyroxine, that is iodine. So with that, students, I'll move on to the next question. Question number 11. How much is the mass of sodium chloride contained in 100 cm³ of a sodium chloride solution of concentration 1 mole per decimeter cube? Their sodium is 23 and chlorine 35.5. So these are all given to us. The volume is given, concentration and the relative atomic masses are given to us. So if you are to calculate that, you know the equation concentration equals N over V. So from that we can find the number of moles. Concentration is here, that is 1 mole per decimeter cube into volume 100 centimeter cube, but we need to convert it to decimeter cubes. So you need to divide it by 1000. Then of course you will get the answer as 0.1 mole. So that is the number of moles of sodium chloride contained in 100 centimeter cube of 1 mole per decimeter cube solution. Then if you need to find the mass, what do we need to do? We need to find the relative molecular mass of sodium chloride. So there it is 23 plus 35.5. So you get the answer as 58.5. 23 plus 35.5, 58.5. When you keep on doing calculations like this, I'm sure you all are familiar with all these values. Then, if you want to find the mass of sodium chloride, what do we do? Number of moles into relative molecular mass. So that will give you the value as 5.85 grams. You can do this calculation in 2 steps like this. One thing, you find the number of moles, then you substitute and find the mass of the substance. Or else, you can do it in another method also. You will still get the same answer. Here you all know. Now 1 mole equals 58.5 grams. So, if it is 1 mole per decimeter cube solution, 1 mole per decimeter cube solution, that will contain 58.5 grams. That is 1 mole per decimeter cube, 1 decimeter cube solution. So, in 100 centimeter cubes, what is the amount? So, there what do we do? In 1000 centimeter cubes, there is 58.5. Therefore, in 100 centimeter cubes, you can do it this way also. Then also you get the same value, 5.85 grams. Is that clear, students? So, 1 mole is equal to 58.5 that we have already calculated. If it is 1 mole per decimeter cube solution, 1 decimeter cube will have 58.5 grams of sodium chloride. Then in 100 centimeter cubes, you will have 5.85 grams of sodium chloride. So, the answer is 5.85 grams. So, here 585 grams, 58.5 grams, 5.85 grams, that is the answer. 0.585 grams, no. So, that's how we calculate the amount of sodium chloride in a particular solution. Is that clear, students? So, with that, the next question number 12. Now, here you can see questions 12 and 13 are based on the female reproductive system given in the diagram. So, here you can see the diagram, students. Now, if you look at this diagram, you can see there are different parts labeled. Here you can see what is labeled as P is the ovary. You all know there are a pair of ovaries here. They are attached to the fundus of the uterus. Then here you can see these finger-like structures on either side. The funnel-like structure with the finger-like projections, that is the fallopian tube. So, the fallopian tube, this is the fimbria of the fallopian tube, and that continues as Q is fallopian tube. So, on either side you have the fallopian tube which is extended from this part, that is the uterus. Uterus is labeled as R. You can see here the walls of the uterus also. Then this part that is labeled as S, you all know it is the vagina. So, those are the parts labeled in this particular diagram. And you all know the functions also. Into the vagina only sperms are released, and the sperm travels through the uterus into the fallopian tube. At the same time, the ovum develops in the ovary. You all know the menstrual cycle. On the 14th day, the ovum is released. That is released into the body cavity, but with the movement of the fimbria. Those are the finger-like projections. The ovum is directed into the fallopian tube. So, somewhere here in the fallopian tube, the sperm and egg meets and fertilization takes place. Thereafter, the fertilized zygote rolls back into the uterus and gets embedded into the wall of the uterus. That is what we call as interplantation or implantation. And thereafter, there is the sac that is developed around the embryo, that is the embryonic sac, and there is the embryonic fluid inside which the fetus develops. And the transport of materials occurs through the umbilical cord that is connected to the uterus using the placenta. The placenta is the structure that connects the uterus wall with the umbilical cord. So, that is how the female reproductive system functions. And you all know, although there is the menstrual cycle, that happens both in the ovaries as well as the uterus. And the ovaries produce hormones also. They secrete estrogen and progesterone. So, those are all what you need to know in relation to the female reproductive system. Then, If we look at the question, number 12, R and S respectively represent. So, we have already identified R as the uterus and S as the vagina. So, uterus and vagina, correct. Uterus and fallopian tube, ovary and vagina, ovary and fallopian tube. So, it is uterus and vagina. Is that clear? Then the next question, the same diagram is given to us. So, I have already explained it. 13, an ovum fertilizes with a sperm. So, I told you all, Q is the fallopian tube. Inside the fallopian tube only, the fertilization occurs. So, the answer should be Q. P, Q, R, S. So, it has to be Q. That is the fallopian tube. Is that clear, students? So, with that, we'll move on to the next question. That is question number 14. The image of a real object produced by a convex mirror is always. So, when you have a real object, what type of image is formed by a convex mirror? Look at the answers. Real and smaller than the object, real and larger than the object, virtual and smaller than the object, virtual and larger than the object. Before we answer this question, I will move on to the next slide where I discuss the ray diagram with you all. Now here I have put this ray diagram where we have the formation of an image from a convex mirror. So here students, you can see formation of an image from a convex mirror. So here you can see this is a convex mirror and this is the object. So the rays are reflected by the mirror and here you can see a virtual image that is smaller in size. Now this is the object, this is the image. Image is smaller in size and also it is virtual as well as it is upright. So because the convex mirror forms images like this, irrespective of the position of the object. You can bring the object closer, you can take the object far away, but still you will get only this type of image. Always it is a virtual, smaller than the object and it is upright. That is why we use the convex mirrors as the side mirrors of vehicles so that you can cover a large area within that small mirror. Is that clear, students? But the different types of images are actually formed by the concave mirror. Just to have a look at the types of images, I have put all these diagrams. Here you can see depending on the position of the object. When the object is between the mirror and the focal point, you can see it is a virtual, upright and enlarged image. Here you can see when it is on the focal point, the image is formed at infinity. Whereas when we have it on the between the center of curvature and the focal point, you can see it is an inverted, enlarged and real image. Then on this side, when the object is on the center of curvature, you get the image on the center of curvature, the same size, inverted as well as real image. And here you can see when the object is beyond the center of curvature. Here the object is here. You can see the image between focal point and center of curvature. The image is diminished, it's smaller than the object or diminished, inverted as well as it is a real image. You can get it on the screen. So, different types of images are formed by the concave mirror. Now, these are concave mirrors. Concave mirror forms different types of images, whereas the convex mirror, irrespective of the position of the image, always forms one type of image. Smaller than the object, upright, and it is virtual. So, that is how we select the property. So, the image of a real object produced by a convex mirror is always real and smaller than the object? No, it is not real. Real and larger than the object? No, it is neither. Virtual and smaller than the object? Correct. Virtual and larger than the object? That is also incorrect. So, the property is virtual and smaller than the object. Is that clear, students? So, it's always virtual and smaller than the object. So with that, we'll move on to the next question. So then question number 15. What is the increasing order of pH of 4 solutions of HCl? Acetic acid CH3COOH is acetic acid, then NaOH, sodium hydroxide, and ammonia of equal concentration. So when they have equal concentration, you need to look at the nature of the substance. So there you can see hydrochloric acid HCl is a strong acid. So it decomposes or dissociates completely in the aqueous solution. Then there is more amount of H plus ions. Then the pH will be very less. So you all know normally from 1 up to 7, that is 6, these are acidic pH values, acidic. Then 7 is normally neutral at 25 degrees Celsius. Then 8 to 14 is the basic pH value. So if you have a strong acid, usually it's about 1 to 3 pH. 3 to 6 will be a weak acid, then neutral substance 7. 8 to about 10 or even 11 will be a weak base, and thereafter up to 14 it is going to be a strong base. So if you look at the solutions, now HCl will be somewhere here because it is a strong acid. Then we have acetic acid. Acetic acid is a weak acid. So it dissociates incompletely in the aqueous solution. So the amount of H plus is less. Therefore, the pH is higher compared to HCl. It is still acidic pH, but it is higher compared to HCl. Then we have sodium hydroxide, which is a strong base. So complete dissociation and gives rise to OH minus ions. So the pH is high, somewhere closer to 14. Then we have ammonia. Ammonia is a weak base. So because of that, it will have a pH somewhere here. So the order of increasing pH will be HCl, acetic acid, ammonia and NaOH. So here increasing order of pH. So this is what you need to select. HCl, acetic acid, NaOH, ammonia is wrong. HCl, acetic acid, ammonia, sodium hydroxide, that is correct. The second answer is correct. Then acetic acid, hydrochloric acid, sodium hydroxide, ammonia, incorrect. Acetic acid, hydrochloric acid, ammonia, NaOH, that is also not correct. So the correct order is this: hydrochloric acid, acetic acid, ammonia and sodium hydroxide. So you need to look at the solution, whether it's an acid or a base, and also you need to consider whether it's a strong acid or a weak acid, strong base or a weak base. That is how we decide on the pH. Is that clear, student? So with that, I'll move on to the next question. Question number 16. What is the number of carbon dioxide, that is CO2 molecules in 22 grams of carbon dioxide? Carbon is given as 12 and oxygen 16. Avogadro constant is equal to 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 per mole. So if you take 1 mole of any substance, that will contain Avogadro number of particles, 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 number of constituent particles. At the same time, 1 mole has a mass of molar mass substance. You calculate the relative atomic mass or relative molecular mass for a compound, and if that is in grams per mole, we call it molar mass. So the mass of 1 mole of substance. So here, if you look at this, if you calculate the relative molecular mass of carbon dioxide, carbon 12 plus, there are 2 oxygen atoms, 2 times 16. So that is going to be 12 plus 32 is 44. That is the relative molecular mass. So that means if you take 44 grams of carbon dioxide, that is equal to 1 mole, and that will contain 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 carbon dioxide molecules. So therefore in 22 grams. So if you are to calculate the number of molecules, how will you get? In 44 grams, there is 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 particles. Therefore, in 22 grams. That is how you calculate. Now, this can be simplified, but as you can see, the answers are given in the form of equation. So, we don't have to simplify this. Now, if we look at the answers. 22 divided by 44 into 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23. That is the same as this. Only thing they have rearranged is 22 divided by 44. So, the first answer is correct. Second one, 44 divided by 22 into 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23, not correct. 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 divided by 44 into 22, that's also incorrect. And the fourth answer, 44 into 22 into 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23. That is also not correct. So, the correct answer is the first answer. Is that clear, student? So, you have to know the relationship. Relative molecular mass amount of substance is equal to 1 mole. 1 mole contains Avogadro number of particles. Based on that, you find the number of particles in the given sample. Is that clear? So, with that, I'll move on to the next one, question number 17. The chemical formula of the chemical fertilizer urea is CONH2 twice. There you have to remember, students, because NH2 is within brackets, that is 2 times, we say it as twice. CONH2 twice. So that means there is 1 carbon, 1 oxygen, and there are 2 NH2 components. So there are 2 nitrogen atoms and 4 hydrogen atoms in the molecule. That is why we put the brackets. CONH2 twice. Select the correct statement about urea. So here you need to select the correct statement about urea. First one, urea possesses the properties of the constituent elements. Is that correct? Now you have the constituent elements. When they form a chemical bond, they form a compound. The properties of that compound is different from the properties of the constituent elements. I have explained this with the examples. You can remember hydrogen is a gas, colorless gas, very light gas. Oxygen is a gas that is there in the atmosphere, again colorless gas. But when both of them combine, you get H2O water, which is a liquid, again colorless, odorless, tasteless liquid. But the properties of hydrogen, oxygen and water are different from each other. So, hydrogen and oxygen are constituent elements. Their properties are different from the compound water. The same way here, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, they are all different. Carbon is a solid, whereas oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, they are gases. Urea is a solid compound. But the properties are all different from one another. Is that clear? So, the first statement is incorrect. Then the second one, a molecule of urea has 2 carbon atoms. That is wrong. There is only 1 carbon, CONH2 twice. A molecule of urea has 4 hydrogen atoms. That is correct. I told you all, when we write CONH2 twice, there are 2 nitrogens and 4 hydrogens. Why? There is NH2 component 2 times. So, it has 1 carbon, 1 oxygen, 2 nitrogens and 4 hydrogens. So, the third statement is correct. And the fourth one, the total number of atoms in a urea molecule is 7. That is also wrong. Why? Because we have 1 carbon, 1 oxygen, there are 2 nitrogens and there are 4 hydrogens. So, in total, you have 8 atoms. 1 carbon, 1 oxygen, 2 nitrogen and 4 hydrogen. There are 8 atoms. So, fourth one is also incorrect. So, the correct statement is that a molecule of urea has 4 hydrogen atoms. Is that clear? So, with that, we'll move on to the next question. Question number 18. Which option contains only the components that are found in the glomerular filtrate but not in urine of a healthy person? The answers: glucose amino acids, water glucose, urea amino acids, water urea. Now to understand that, I will explain the structure of a nephron. Now here you can see a structure of a nephron. You all know renal artery. Through that the artery is given to the glomerulus. Then afferent arteriole. Then you have the efferent arteriole coming out of the glomerulus. Here there is ultrafiltration taking place and substances are filtered into the Bowman's capsule from blood. You have to remember the plasma protein and the blood cells do not get filtered in a healthy person's nephron. Thereafter, when the Bowman's filtrate goes through this proximal convoluted tube, descending limb, then the Henle's loop and the ascending limb, again into the distal convoluted tubules and finally to the collecting duct. Here what happens is there is selective reabsorption taking place as well as secretion occurs there. So, when there is selective reabsorption, a certain amount of water is reabsorbed. That again depends on the amount of water in the human body, homeostasis of water. Then the glucose has to be reabsorbed. Usually, if it is a healthy person, there should be no glucose in the urine. If there is glucose, that means that person has diabetes. There are certain amount of vitamins and other constituents also reabsorbed. So, you cannot have glucose in the urine. Is that clear, student? So, then the urine is produced and it is collected into the collecting duct. So, that is the process happening in a nephron. 3 steps: ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption and also the secretion. With that, I'll move back to the question. So, here, which option contains only the components that are found in the glomerular filtrate but not in the urine of a healthy person? So, you cannot have it in the urine of the healthy person. First one, glucose amino acid. Both of them cannot be present in urine. Then water and glucose. Water, yes, but glucose cannot be present in urine. Urea and amino acid. They are also, urea is the nitrogenous excretory product, urea, uric acid. They are present in urine but not amino acid. The same way, fourth answer, water, urea. That of course can be present in urine. Urine, the main constituent is water. Urea is the nitrogenous base product. So again, if you read the question, students, which option contains only the components that are found in the glomerular filtrate but not in the urine? So it should not be there in urine. It should be present in the glomerular filtrate. So if you look at the answers, first one, glucose and amino acid, yes, they are present in glomerular filtrate, but they cannot be present in the urine of a healthy person. Both glucose and amino acid. I mentioned to you all, if there is glucose, that means it is diabetic patient. If there is amino acids, that means the nephron is not functioning properly. So, you cannot have proteins, amino acids or glucose in the urine of a healthy person. So, there the answer is the first one. But if you look at the second one, water and glucose. Water can be present in both glomerular filtrate and urine. It is actually present because water is the main component or constituent of urine. Then urea and amino acid. Urea is present in urine. It is the nitrogenous excretory product. as well as it is present in glomerular filtrate. But amino acid that is filtered by the glomerulus is reabsorbed during selective reabsorption. So that cannot be present in urine. Fourth one, water and urea. Both of them, they are present in glomerular filtrate as well as they are present in urine, because water is the main constituent of urine and urea is the nitrogenous excretory material present in urine. So the answer to this question is the first one, glucose and amino acid. Is that clear, students? So with that, I'll move on to the next one. So question number 19. A jackfruit of mass 10 kg is falling freely from a height of 5 meters of a jack tree. What is the velocity acquired by the fruit when it touches the ground? Acceleration due to gravity is 10 meters per second, and assume that the resistance of air is negligibly small. So what is happening here? Now there is a height of 5 meters. So this height is 5 meters and there is a jackfruit that has a mass of 10 kilogram. And that is falling down from the height, and they want you to find the velocity acquired when the fruit reaches the ground. So when it reaches the ground, you need to find the velocity. The gravitational acceleration g is given to you as 10 meters per second square. And also you have to consider or assume that the resistance of air is negligible. So there is no effect due to the resistance of air. Now if you want to find the velocity, what is the easiest method that you can use? Now here you have the fruit at a certain height, and when it falls down, it will reach the ground with a certain velocity. So you can relate this to the mechanical energy. That is the potential energy and the kinetic energy of the fruit. So here you can see the velocity of the fruit is 0 because it is on a tree. So that means there is no kinetic energy, but there is potential energy. E potential is there. As it comes down, now since they say the resistance of air is negligible, so there will be no energy lost. So because of that, all this potential energy will be converted to kinetic energy when the fruit reaches the ground. So here there will be only kinetic energy. So what we need to do is we need to substitute for the potential energy, kinetic energy. They are both equal. Then you can find the velocity. So if I do that, here you can see potential energy is equal to mgh. So that is equal to mass of the fruit is 10 kilogram, gravitational acceleration 10, and the height is 5 meters. That is one equation. The second equation is for kinetic energy, half mv square. So that is equal to half into mass is 10 and v square. The second equation. But here you all know potential energy equals kinetic energy. Therefore, 10 into 5 is equal to half into 10 into v square. From this, we can cancel off these two. So, we have 10 into 5 into 2 equals v square. So, that means 100 equals v squared. V is equal to root of 100. That is equal to 10 meters per second. That would be the velocity of the jackfruit when it reaches the ground. So here you have to remember there is no energy loss. All the potential energy is converted to kinetic energy. When the fruit is at a height, it's the potential energy. when it reaches the ground, all that potential energy is converted to kinetic energy. So, if we go up, here the answers are given to us. You can see 5 meters per second, 10 meters per second, the correct answer 50 meters per second and 100 meters per second. So, it is 10 meters per second. Is that clear, students? So, with that, I'll move on to the next question. Question number 20. Select the correct statement regarding the circulation of blood in humans. So, to answer this question, first I'll explain the human circulatory system in the next slide. So, here I have put the circulatory system, the diagram, double circulation. We will try to understand why we call it the double circulation. Here you can see the heart. Now, from the heart, you can see initially from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, the deoxygenated blood, that is why it's in blue color, is collected into the right atrium. This side is right, that side is left. So, into the right atrium. From there, it is pumped into the right ventricle. From there, from the right ventricle, you can see through the pulmonary artery, the deoxygenated blood is taken to the lungs. And thereafter, there is exchange of gases. There is oxygenated blood coming from the lungs to the left atrium. That particular circulation is known as the pulmonary circulation. So, this part is the pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation. Then, what happens after that? When the oxygenated blood comes into the left atrium, it is pumped into the left ventricle. From there, you can see from the aortic arch, the aorta takes the blood into the systemic artery where blood is supplied to various parts of the body. Then again, from there, deoxygenated blood comes back to the heart. So, this particular circulation is known as the systemic circulation. So, during this whole process, pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation, you were able to understand that the blood passes through the heart twice. First, the deoxygenated blood, then it goes to the lung. Again, the oxygenated blood goes to the rest of the body. So, blood passes 2 times through the heart during one complete circulation. That is why we call it as double circulation. Is that clear? And also, usually arteries take blood away from the heart. Here you can see pulmonary artery takes deoxygenated blood, whereas the aorta, the systemic arteries, they take oxygenated blood. And also veins bring the blood back to the heart. And usually here you can see superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, the veins take blood from the body to the heart. There usually it is deoxygenated blood, but here pulmonary veins contain oxygenated blood. That is something. Then between the arteries and the veins in the organs, there are capillaries. Those are things that you need to remember. In addition to that, students, when I mentioned about veins, you have to remember there is the hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein. Now, this hepatic portal vein connects the small intestine with the liver, so that the digestive end products, when there is food digestion taking place in the digestive system, it completes in the small intestine. All the end products are absorbed into the blood vessels except for fatty acid and glycerol. All of them are taken from the small intestine to the liver by this hepatic portal vein. And you all know in the liver what happens when there is higher amount of glucose in the blood. Glucose is converted to glycogen or fats by insulin. So that happens in the liver. So this particular vein connects the small intestine with the liver. It does not have any connection to the heart. So that is also something you need to remember. So that is the information needed for these questions, students. Now we will try to answer the question. So then select the correct statement. So you need to select the correct statement regarding the circulation of blood in humans. Always arteries contain oxygenated blood. No. Pulmonary artery contains deoxygenated blood. When circulated once through the body, blood goes twice through lungs. No. Blood goes twice through the heart, not through the lungs. Then the third one, left ventricle acts as the pump of systemic blood circulation. That is correct. From the left ventricle only, systemic circulation, the blood is pumped. Then the fourth one, always veins circulate blood away from the heart. That is also incorrect now. I told you all about hepatic portal vein. So the hepatic portal vein carries blood from the small intestine to the liver. So it does not carry blood to the heart. So that is also incorrect. So the correct statement is the left ventricle acts as the pump of systemic blood circulation. You understood all this with the diagram in the previous slide. So I am sure you can understand this question as well. So up to now, students, I have discussed the first 20 MCQ type questions. With that, I am going to end this chapter, and in the next chapter, I will continue with the rest of the questions.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.